Boom. Awesome. All right. Welcome, everyone. And where we're picking up today is on page 85. And I am known for finding the most natural and easy to find stopping places. So it's right easy to pick up again. So this week we'll be in the middle of the paragraph, the middle of the second paragraph. Where we left off was on the line, what we really have is a daily reprieve, contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. And so what's leading us into that is that idea that it is easy to rest on our laurels. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit, in part so everyone can find it, because I didn't do a good job finding a natural stopping place last week. But it talks about it's easy to let up on the spiritual program of action. It is easy to become complacent. But the truth of the matter is that complacency is a killer for people like us, for alcoholics. Alcoholics do not have the luxury of complacency. And what we read last week is the idea that I am not cured of alcoholism. I am recovered. Recovered, meaning that the obsession of the mind is removed as the result of these steps. We were speaking last week about step 10 and the 10th step promises. And so this idea is that we are recovered, but we are not cured. And to be recovered but not cured would be that I could drink again, and I can never drink again. Cured would also mean that I wouldn't have to be fully engaged in the 12 steps as a way of life. But the truth of the matter is, just as I can never ever safely drink again, there will never be a time when I can safely not be fully engaged in the 12 steps as a way of life. That is what it means to be recovered. But I am not cured. And so, instead of being cured, what we really have is a daily reprieve, contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. So some of y'all know that I really enjoy words, and I love looking them up and look them up in my dictionary and going through the etymology and all of that. But one of the most perfect definitions for reprieve, as it applies to alcoholics like us, is the idea that a reprieve is a stay of execution. And welcome to everyone that just joined us. We're on page 85. What we really have is a daily reprieve. And so it is a daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. So that idea of reprieve is a stay of execution. And I always like to visually imagine this. You know, as an alcoholic, I'm on death row. We're on death row. We're counting the days. And earlier on in the book, it talks about that in that last mile from my cell to the execution chamber. And what it's saying is, on a daily basis, the illness that I have is going to march me out of my cell and to the execution chamber. That is what my illness is going to do. And on a daily basis, that illness, it's going to strap me down. But what I get is at the last moment, the red phone on the wall, it rings. You know, it's the governor saying, no, we will stay that execution. And I get a new chance at sobriety, at life, on a daily basis. But I'm going to point out, it is not contingent on my spiritual condition. It is contingent on the maintenance of my spiritual condition. That is good news. You might be like, girl, you being pedantic again. I am. I have a t-shirt that says pedantic with purpose. Brian got it for me. Some of you guys know Brian. But I am. I'm being pedantic, but I'm doing so with purpose. You see, if my sobriety, my daily reprieve, my sobriety was contingent on my spiritual condition, that implies it would be contingent on how I feel. But my sobriety is not contingent on how I feel. My sobriety is contingent on what I do, the actions that I take, the maintenance of my spiritual condition. And as a result of that, I'll feel pretty good, to be honest with you. But if I'm trying to coast, now I know none of you guys here knows what it's like to coast on spiritual actions we took, last month, last year, last 5, 10, 20, no one here has ever coasted. But I want to coast. And what it's saying is that I can't. And I love this. Every day, which is to say today, every day is a day when we must. Some of you guys, no must in the book. And I'm like, ooh, it's feeling a little musty, getting a little musty in here. Look at that must. Every day is a day when we must carry the vision of God's will into all of our activities. And if you guys remember in step 10, we were speaking about how we got a new job description to our employment. You see, in step 3, we got fired from the management position of our lives and we work for God. And what that looks like is I work these 12 steps as a way of life, like my life depends on it, because it does. And last week we spoke this idea that we've entered the world of the Spirit. We've entered that fourth dimension. And our next function is to grow in understanding and effectiveness of God's will for us. And now, on a daily basis, we get to carry that vision of God's will for us into all of our activities. Actually, to be fair, that could sound really overwhelming to a lot of people, like every day and like God's will. Yikes, I don't know what that is. Fair enough. But on a daily basis, I get to show up and be an agent for God. On a daily basis, we get to show up and be an expression of God and God's love and God's will. And if you're like, man, how do I know what's God's will? I'll give you a hint. It's the inventory that we're sitting on. It's the amends that we haven't made. It's the evening review we haven't done. It's It's that newcomer that shows up at the meeting and says they need help. That is God's will. And if we show up with that consistently, the other things, man, I promise they will be automatic. But if you're struggling with but is God's will for me to take the job, or it's God's will for me to get the husband or leave the husband, or is God's will for me to take the trip, not take the trip? We're talking about taking the trip earlier today. What is God's will? And I'll tell you what my experience is. I don't think God cares so much about where I move to, what job I take, who I marry, where I go. I think God cares more about how I show up to the job that I have, how I show up to the relationship that I have, or leave the relationship, how I show up. See, what is the posture of my heart as I show up to these things? You know what I mean? Anyone? I actually, in the third step, it talks about where it's like, even with the best motives, I'm a producer of confusion rather than harmony. But if I show up with that God-centered posture of my heart, we get to be agents. We get to be expressions of God's love in the world. And then it says, and by the way, sorry, I'm off on another tangent. All of our activities. Not a tangent. I was going to talk about it, and then I forgot, and then I got back to it. All of our activities, I'll point out, this AA thing, these 12 steps, it's not a thing that I do in between the prayers of the meetings. It is how I live all areas of my life outside of the prayers of the meetings. How we show up, all our activities. So it's not that I have my 12-step life over here, a family life over here, a job life over here, friends over here, hobbies over here. It is that 12-step way of life immerses itself in all areas of my life. I show up to all areas with the spirit of love and service. I show up to all areas, man, when life is hard, I utilize that engine of 4 through 9, and I'll utilize it in step 10. You know what I'm saying? Like, the 12 steps are how we live our lives and all areas of our lives. Now, what follows is what I like to call the step 10 prayer. Do y'all know we got a 10th step prayer because we're technically in step 10? It's a prayer. We got a prayer. How can I best serve thee? Thy will, not mine, be done. What a beautiful prayer. And it says these are thoughts which must go with us constantly. So this idea of constantly being in this prayer of how can I best serve thee? Thy will, not mine, be done. And we can do that. We can bring that prayer into all areas of our life. Before we go to a meeting, before we pick up the phone, before we see somebody, before we go get groceries, before we have to do paperwork, we can utilize that prayer. But also one of the things that I'm big on, and we're approaching step 11, so we're going to be talking about prayer and meditation, is I can utilize this prayer as a meditative technique. And I can breathe in, how can I best serve thee? And I can breathe out, thy will be done, or thy will, not mine, be done. And when you work with that as a meditative practice for a while, it is easy, or it becomes a lot easier. Actually, I do think, don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure I recorded a meditation that was based on this. I can't remember if I have or not, to be honest with you, which is really bothersome. If I have, I'll throw it in the chat when we're doing the discussion. No, I'm pretty sure I did. Oh, how convenient. Also convenient that I remembered. I have some problems with my attention. I'm sure that's a surprise for all of you. But when I work with this as a mantra, that helps it to move with me constantly. And the more that I ask, the more that this thing becomes automatic. And I'm not having to force myself to be like, okay, how can I best serve God? Thy will, not mine, be done. But it's it becomes automatic. And at first it takes effort. And in fact, the next line says, we can exercise our willpower along this line all we wish. It is the proper use of the will. And an interesting thing in Alcoholics Anonymous is that willpower has no power for the alcoholic, in the sense that I cannot use any willpower that I've got, and I've got willpower, guys. Some of you guys know, there's a time in my life where I had abs. I was cut, I had abs. My abs not once led to abstinence. And as some of you guys know, I was ripped. I was ripped, but I kept getting ripped, It did nothing to keep me sober. But to get into that type of shape, right now the shape is squishy and spiritually fit. That's my shape. I'm good with it, guys. I'm good with it. But to get in that type of shape, it took discipline. I am somebody that has tremendous willpower. But when I try to use willpower against the barrage of the mental obsession, it does nothing. It's like me standing in the ocean and trying to prevent the waves. My willpower does nothing. The next wave is going to come. But the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous do require willpower. So this is the duality of this idea. It takes willpower to meet your sponsor when you don't want to. It takes willpower to write that inventory you don't want to write. It takes willpower to make that amends, even to my ex, that we don't want to do. It takes willpower to pray, to meditate. It takes willpower to bring this prayer into our life. It takes willpower to do a 10th step. It takes willpower to show up for a sponsee, especially if they're a little tricky, a little difficult, a crunchy one. It takes, not me, because I have some sponsees here. It's not difficult for me ever. But you know that feeling before you meet a sponsee and you're like, oh, cancel. Don't cancel, because then I have to have a conversation about the importance of not canceling, but cancel, we all feel like that. So it takes willpower. And so the willpower, what we do is we align our will with the will of God. And we do that in utilizing our willpower to write that inventory, to do that 5th step, to spend that quiet hour, to do the 6 and 7, and to go and make amends, to keep this thing rocking and rolling, and to help others. That's how we align our will with God's. And yeah, we got some willpower. That takes willpower. And doing that will keep me sober. But using willpower to go to the gym, wonderful, get in shape, do it. Will not keep an alcoholic sober. So that is where I line my willpower. So page 85. It says, much has already been said about receiving strength, inspiration, and direction from Him who has all knowledge and power. And keep in mind, by the time I come to Alcoholics Anonymous, I am powerless. I have no power. There is no power that I can put between me and the inevitability of the first drink. And I do a study earlier. I do 2 on Wednesdays because I'm an alcoholic. 1 big book study is not enough. I do 4 a week actually. So at the earlier study, I was talking about hopeless. And we're in step 1, and we're talking about the hopeless, and powerless. And we talk about powerlessness, and we talk about unmanageability a lot in Alcoholics Anonymous. But I think we don't always spell out what it means. To be powerless is to drink again. If I am powerless, I will drink again. If I am hopeless, I will drink again. That's what we're talking about. So I'm showing up with no knowledge, no power. I got nothing. So why would I not want to receive, to gain access from that who has all knowledge and power? And when it talks about strength, inspiration, and direction, I can tell you I had no strength, despite being able to do bicep curls. Actually, I was doing squats and stuff, but I know no strength to keep me sober. I was not inspired, and the direction that I was in a circle, like a boat with one oar. I was going around in a circle, and that circle is that cycle of alcoholism. I'm never going to drink again. Restless, irritable, discontent, and I get a thought, and that thought tells me I can drink again, and off I go, and I burn it to the ground, and I say I'm never going to drink again, and then I get a thought, and off I go. And that is what I'm stuck with. So I have no strength and no inspiration and no direction. I have no knowledge and power. So why would I not want to receive that? And that's what we receive, a strength that is not our own, an inspiration that is not ours, and a direction that is real and purposeful from him who has all knowledge and power. And I love that it says receive, because I'm big on this, that I did not earn this. I did not deserve this life of sobriety. I'm an alcoholic. I'm meant to die. That is the prognosis for alcoholism. It is fatal, and it is not pleasant. And yet here I am today, alive and sober, and I'm happy. Do you know what I mean? Those 3 things together, they didn't exist together before I got here. And even when I got here, and I wasn't doing all of it. And that's what I didn't earn it, and I don't deserve it, and I'm not more or less worthy of it than anyone here in this room that is decades more than me, or anyone that is out there dying of this illness. I take a course of action I don't like, I don't agree with, I don't think will help, I'm absolutely terrified, and the gift, it happens to me. Excuse me, it happens to me. So this whole thing is about receiving that which was available the whole time. The strength, direction, and inspiration is available to each and every one of us in the here and now. Everyone it's available to. And all I need to do is take some actions that I don't want to take. It's like, oh, is that it? But we know what it's like when I don't want to do it. And it says, if we have carefully followed directions. So my friend Terry and I, we do a study on Fridays, and Terry oftentimes, and I've stolen this from him, that's why I'm giving him credit, that this is a book of mirrors. I want to hold my experience up to this book and see, is that me? And I want to do that in step 1. I want to see, man, do I have that allergy? Do I have that obsession? I want to do that with the bedevilments. I want to do that with page 60, 61, 62. I want to see, is that me? But just as strongly do I want to hold this book of mirrors up to my experience. Is this my experience? So we can ask ourselves, if we have carefully followed directions, is this our experience? We've begun to sense the flow of his spirit into us. And it is a flow. Have I begun to experience that flow? And so some of the things that I like to do is I like to take slogans that we hear in AA and recontextualize them, especially ones that don't work. Yeah, absolutely. Equilateral triangle, absolutely. We got to be a part of this thing. But it's that idea that, like, if you've ever gone to the meetings and you heard, Keep the plug in the jug. You just gotta keep the plug in the jug. Well, I want you to know, as an alcoholic, my jug perpetually unplugged. I don't have the ability to keep that plug in that jug. It gets unplugged. Like, that is, sorry, I didn't mean to, I'm hearing me and I'm like, goodness gracious. I don't have that ability. But here's the thing, when it comes to spirituality, when it comes to this flow into us, man, I gotta be unplugged. I gotta get unplugged. I gotta clear the way, the stuff that is in me that's blocking me from this power, and I've got to let it flow. And it's just flow into me, but also flow through me to those who need it most. It is a flow. And I've been having some trouble sleeping. And so I've been listening to my old spiritual audiobooks. Like, by old, I mean like books from the 1900s. The early 1900s. I'm not talking about 1998. Like I'm talking about Evelyn Underhill's. You know what I mean? I'm talking those. And I was listening to one, and there was a line that struck me, and I've shared it here before, but it was that idea of from goodness, through goodness, and to goodness. The power that I am accessing is divine goodness, and it is coming through goodness. The root of who I am is not the piece of garbage that I thought I was. We experienced that in step 7, through goodness and to goodness. The person that is before me that I am trying to help at the depth and the core of who they are is good, is goodness. On a tangent on that. Didn't plan to be, but that's how this goes. So have I begun to sense this flow? And it says, to some extent, we have become God conscious. Now, that word conscious, we've spoken about this a number of times before. But the word conscious is Latin in origin. And con means with, and shus or sire means knowing. You see, it's step 2, when we approach the chapter, we agnostics. The word agnostic in its Greek origin, so it's a completely different language structure. In its Greek, it is ag means without, and gnosis means knowledge. But again, that gnosis is not... It's not the intellectual, yeah, I know. You know, when you're working with a sponsee, or you are the sponsee, and it's like, yeah, I know. Ugh. Turn into a teenager, you get the eye rolls. How's that inventory going? I know. Ugh. Right? It's not that knowing. It's not a head level knowing. It's not a recitation of things from memory. It is a heart level knowing. And at the second step, all of us are without that heart level knowing. But here, as we transition from step 10 to step 11, what we have is become God conscious, that with knowing. So if we are here today and we've not had all 12 steps active in our lives, and we're feeling that sense of disconnection, that is normal, that is understandable. And the purpose of the 12 steps is to bring about that heart level knowing. And I always like to share this story, so I'm going to share it. The gentleman who gave us knowledge of what our solution is. Now, our solution in Alcoholics Anonymous is a spiritual awakening. And the individual who told us what the solution is, or who gave us knowledge of that, was Dr. Carl Jung. And there's this famous BBC interview of Dr. Carl Jung. And in it, they ask him, growing up, did you believe in God? And he says, yeah, growing up, I believed in God. And then they ask him, do you believe in God now? And Dr. Carl Jung says, no. There's a brief pause. He says, I've got no need for belief. And there's a pause. And he says, I know. And that's what happens here. If I take the course of action, I will go from that without knowing, just maybe there could be something to an experience. And I can ask myself, am I having that God-conscious experience? And here's the thing. If we're like, and it begun, doesn't mean I'm having the whole kit and caboodle right now. But am I beginning? And if the answer is no, that's okay. It's just telling us that we might have to go back and see about following directions. Because if I follow these directions, this is the result that is promised. It goes on to say we have begun to develop. It's a beginning. This thing is a way of life. Begun to develop this vital sixth sense. But we must go further, and that means more action. Oh man, into action. It's so actiony, and we only got 1 hour of break. Come on. But one of the things you guys know, I talk about this a lot, is that I cannot have crock pot sobriety. You know, where you put it in the slow cooker and you set it and forget it, right? That's what this paragraph or this page is screaming. I can't have crock pot sobriety. I gotta have stir fry sobriety. I gotta be up and in there and moving it around, you know? I'm more of a frozen dinners on my own power. I'm a frozen dinner sort of person. That's my level of cooking. So if that doesn't make, if you're like, that's not how stir fries work, you're right. I don't know how they work. But I can't set it and forget it. And actually it was, Mary pointed this out. We were talking about varieties of religious experience. And there was a part in there where it talks about how it's common for people to have a spiritual experience and experience some backsliding, I'll use the word relapse, but he didn't mean it in the way we mean it. And it's a reminder that I could not stay well on one drink. I couldn't stay well on one drink. That just was not possible for somebody like me. I cannot stay well on one experience. The experience that I had last week, when I first got in or first began to live this way of life, I can't stay well on that. I need to continue to grow and to seek. And there's times where it talks about, a lot of people talk about, I grow at the pace of pain. And when we get here, without question, we grow at the pace of pain, but we don't have to live there. We can grow at the desire to know this power more. We can grow at the pace of love instead of the pace of pain. I got to grow at the pace of pain first. I got to do the thing, and the only reason I'm going to do the thing is because it hurts. But I can then do this thing out of a desire to seek and to know and to experience and to help others. And it is incredible when we make that transition. But we got to go further. And that means more action. Action. So it says step 11 suggests prayer and meditation. And, which is a little rude, because I don't know about you guys. I read this whole thing as and or for quite some time. I'm like, it's prayer and or meditation. It's prayer and meditation. Meditation is not optional. It's part of this deal. Now I'll talk a lot about meditation. Actually, I'll do it now because it's on my mind. A lot of times, there's a lot of myths about meditation as a practice. And I'll talk about this a little bit more when we get to Upon Awakening. But one of the myths of meditation that we hear all the time is that I can't meditate. I can't meditate. Paige, you don't understand. My brain, it's constantly all over the place. It doesn't sit still. Have you met me? Have you met me? Do we see how my brain goes? You know what I mean? No. And here's the thing. Nobody's brain sits in perfect stillness. And meditation is not us sitting in perfect stillness. Meditation, absolutely you are, Corinna. Meditation is us bringing our attention to a focus point. And then our mind wandering and us bringing it back. That is meditation. And here's the thing. The more that I bring it back, the stronger that muscle gets. If we go to the gym, and to be fair, I could lift some lighter weights nowadays than back in the day. But if all I'm doing is lifting like a 1 pound weight, I'm not getting a lot of resistance. And in fact, most of us aren't even lifting the weights. We're just sitting there saying, I can't lift weights. I can't lift weights. I can't do it. No, I'm just going to sit and have smoothies. No judgy. But we're not doing the work. We're not lifting it. And so meditation is us lifting the weight of our attention and our mind being distracted and coming back to the point of focus. And if I do not come back to the point of focus, or if I don't like have distractions to come back to, one could almost argue I can't meditate. That is the practice, that is the path. And the more that I have practiced doing that, the more I'm able to watch in the 10th step. You guys know, like if I'm able to bring it back, man, I'm training a muscle. And also there's a meditative practice. It's called centering prayer. You don't have to do it or be excited by it. And its origin comes from a medieval book called The Cloud of Unknowing. Again, you don't need to be interested in that or care about that at all. It's just a meditative practice that was around since the medieval ages. And there was a gentleman that would teach this meditative practice. And in it, he was teaching it to some nuns at a convent, and he asked one of the nuns how did it go, and the practice is that you bring the point of attention is that singular like desire to seek and know and love God. And then your mind will wander and you say a word and you bring it back to that attention. And the nun was like, "Oh, Father, it was terrible. I said the sacred word like 1,000,000 times." So that means she got distracted and came back 1,000,000 times. And the gentleman that was doing the teaching, he said, "How wonderful. That is 1,000,000 surrenders to God. And what a beautiful way to look at meditation. That every time I get distracted, I bring it back. It is another opportunity to surrender to God, higher power, creator, spirit of the universe, whatever words work for you." And that's kind of one of the things too, that sometimes you'll hear people say meditation didn't mean meditation in the 1930s. And unfortunately, that's not quite all the way accurate. I'm sorry. A lot of people really enjoy discursive meditation, which is an active thinking, and there's some elements of that are pointed to upon awakening. But there were others. And I mean, that's part of why I love varieties of religious experience, because it connected some dots for me. Because I would hear people say, meditation doesn't mean meditation. And I was like, that didn't sit right. And if I look up meditation in my 1930s dictionary, it'll talk about thinking or contemplation. But when I read, which I do because I'm fun, varieties of religious experience, it talks about these meditative practices that were around even in the Western tradition since the Middle Ages and beyond. It talks about, and you don't have to like any of these things. St. Teresa of Avila, it spoke about the Quietism movement. It spoke about the Quakers, and they would do an hour of quiet every morning. It would speak about St. Francis de Sales and his book Philothea, or Introduction to the Devout Life. You don't have to give any care about that. But that book is a guided meditation book. It's a book of guided meditations. So they did have these practices. So all of that to say, gotta meditate. Sorry. Oh, but I promise it's the best. And a lot of times we talk about, prayer is speaking to God and meditation is listening. And for those of you who are married, I know we got some married folks, y'all know that if you do not speak to your spouse for like a week or 3 weeks at a time, you're not going to feel very connected to your spouse. Now, here's the kicker. You don't listen to your spouse for like a week or 2 weeks, you're definitely not going to feel very connected. You'll be on the couch and don't know why. But also, a relationship is not simply built on talking and listening. That's part of it. But I've got to clear away those blocks. I've got to grow that intimacy in a relationship. And we do that through the 12 steps. And we've got to experience time together, with each other. And that's also a part of meditation, that union, that connection. And you don't have to view it in that way. But I love that idea of like, I get to have this dedicated time spent with this power. And that's cool. And so prayer and meditation. We shouldn't be shy on this matter of prayer. Better men than we are using it constantly. constantly. And again, pointing back to that, how can I best serve thee? Thy will not mine be done. It is a thought that must go with us constantly. Well, there are books that speak about how you do constant prayer. Spoilers, meditation. That's a big part of that. So a lot of times if you look up prayer, if you look up prayer, it'll give you one type of prayer. But a lot of times different meditative techniques were hidden under the word prayer. So that prayer request, like I can't remember what it's called at the moment, but that a petitionary prayer, a prayer where I'm asking for something, is one type of prayer. But there's other prayers that are really based in meditation. So I just wanted to like shake some stuff up for you and like, oh, there's more to do than just saying things. There's listening and experiencing, and it's fun. And if you don't have to think it's fun, you can be like, oh no, you've given me more work. But then you can write inventory on it, and then it'll be fun. I'm just kidding. And here's the thing. It works. It works. Why am I such a big proponent of meditation? Why am I such a big proponent of what we're going to talk about, evening review? Why am I so big on this? Because my life did not change until I took the 11th step with the seriousness that it required. And that's, man, things changed in the core of who I was for the better. Things that I did not think about me could change. Things that I thought were fundamental to who I am, like being miserable, changed. And it happened to me. I didn't just, okay, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna be happy and positive. No. You know what I did? Prayer and meditation. I worked 4 through 9 like my life depended on. I dove into this work and the change happened to me. So it works. But it says if we have the proper attitude and work at it. So it's going to take work. And some of you guys know I talk about that spiritual, I was alluding to it. Yeah, be amazed by the time you're halfway through. That we're talking about that idea of like building a relationship. And I love, if you don't view your higher power through that lens, feel free to disregard what I'm saying. But I think that relational view is so useful because it helps me to see, like I can mirror it with any other relationship, right? I was helping somebody with steps 1, 2, and 3 today. And we were talking about like step 2 is like being on Tinder and just believing we're not being catfished. That's it. Step 3 is I'm going to swipe right and go on a date. I'm deciding to go on a date. But if you go, now keep in mind, we are people that do not date. We are people who typically, how do you know an alcoholic's on the second date? Well, we showed up to their driveway with our 2 garbage bags full of stuff from treatment. That's how you know an alcoholic's on a second date. So I might be speaking a bit of a foreign language for people like us. But when you first start dating someone and you're like, at a restaurant or something or going for ice cream and you're just talking. We're a little bit guarded, we're a little reserved, and we're nervous, and sometimes we don't feel that connection as clearly. Now, if I were to go on a date with that same person 2 or 3 years later, I'm not going to feel much more connected. But if we begin to speak, and I speak with them, and I listen to them, and I begin to grow in my intimacy and my vulnerability and sharing who I am. And we do things together, not with time, but with consistency. That same person that I was nervous with on that first date becomes that my person. Those people who have like my person where it's like, you just can't wait to get home to tell them about your day, whether it was the worst day you've ever had or the best day. That person that you're excited to be with, that's what we get to have. Now, at first, it's going to feel like talking to a wall, but not with time, but with consistency. That's going to change. So, it would be easy to be vague about this matter. It'd be easy to be vague, yet we believe we can make some definite and valuable suggestions. And so what we're getting into is when we retire at night. So this is the evening review. And again, I'm just going to tie it in to meditation, is Bill Wilson's spiritual advisor, a gentleman who helped him tremendously in his life in sobriety, was a gentleman by the name of Father Ed Dowling. And he happened to be a Jesuit priest, and he came across these steps. And one of the people, I was just listening to his biography not long ago, having trouble sleeping. I was listening to the biography, and somebody in his Jesuit order pointed out that the 12 steps followed a similar pattern to the spiritual exercise of Saint Ignatius of Loyola. And Father Ed Dowling, and I'll tell a bit of the story, because Bill Wilson, he's homeless. He's living at the clubhouse. Lois is out. It's like a rainy, stormy, snowy day. And there's this, stranger that comes. And Father Ed Dowling, he was always a little disheveled. And he was having back problems, so he was limping. He had a cane. And Bill Wilson's in the depths of his depression, sober and depressed. And who shows up is Father Ed Dowling. And Father Ed Dowling shares with him about how amazing, and they made this beautiful connection. And this is not how the conversation went. I'm doing that thing that I do with the history, where I page it up a bit, but we don't have any history husbands to correct me. And so I'm going to say it how I want to. So Father Ed Dowling was like, Bill, my guy, did you know that these 12 steps follow the Ignatian spiritual exercises? And Bill was like, no, I genuinely had no idea. And the reason I point this out is not because you have to be interested in any of that, but those exercises involve meditative practices, including Lectio Divina, as well as the Examen of Conscience, which is a meditative review of the day. So I'm throwing that out, so we can't say meditation didn't exist. You don't have to do those meditations. You don't have to be excited by them at all, but I'm just arguing a point with nobody is what I'm doing. So this is the evening review practice. So it says, when we retire at night, we constructively review our day. And one of the things that I'm going to do is I'm just going to share this screen. Can I put me in the corner? Yeah, I'll put me in the corner. And so what I've done is I have taken the directions out of page 86 and just put them in a format like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way through 10. So it's easy to follow. A lot of people use an app, and that's okay. Now, I'll be very transparent. I do my evening review every night, and I do it pen to paper. You don't have to do that, but I'm a big pen to paper gal. I don't think pen to paper is right. And in fact, it doesn't even tell us to write any of this stuff down, but I am a pen to paper person. And I'll explain why I'm a pen to paper person with this. The reason is because at that time in my life, when I was starting to really take this stuff seriously, there were people in my life who had what I wanted. There were people in my life who were happy, and they had a light about them, and they had a joy, and I could see that they were connected to something. And they were pen to paper people. And I'm like, I'm a pen to paper it. And I remember I was at a camp out. It was a 12-step camp out. And I was doing my evening review, and I was doing it by, one of the people had brought this like little lantern. So I was doing it by lantern, and there were all these bugs around. And he's like, in the book, it doesn't say to put pen to paper. Now, the gentleman who was trying to be technically correct was also an individual who was very difficult in his personality at that time, who was miserable and came to the camp out without a tent. So I wasn't interested in his advice. And the whole reason I point this out is not to tease that guy, but is instead to point out the power of demonstration. It doesn't do any good if I'm telling you what you should do and I'm miserable. It's the people who are on fire for this thing. That's what's inspired me. So when we retire at night, we constructively review our day. And this can be a beautiful opportunity to do an evening meditation practice, to meditatively review our day. For somebody like me, because I have the attention span of a gnat, what that means is I need to write down what I did to even remember. Because that's what I do. When I have my evening review, I write down what I did. Then it says, were we resentful, selfish, dishonest, or afraid? Now, last week, what we would have pointed out is if we go back to page 84, and we look at the directions for step 10, it says continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. we're looking for these same things. If I find myself in resentment, in selfishness, in dishonesty, or in fear, man, I'm not okay. I can't live in the sunlight of the Spirit and be blocked off by selfishness or be blocked off by resentment. And so the evening review does not expect perfection. The evening review is meeting me where I'm at. You see, the 10th step is a safety net, so I can live free and clear in the moment, but I will miss things because I'm a human being with a gnat-sized attention span, so I miss things. And so when I do my evening review, if there's anything that I didn't catch in a 10th step, I get to deal with it here in the evening review. And there may be times things build up, even if I'm reasonably diligent in my evening review. And I can just do some dedicated inventory on it, a 4 through 9 on it. That is okay. And here's what I do. I break it down, so I look at, was I resentful? And what I do is, if I was resentful, I take it through the columns. Because for me, it's not useful to say, yes, I was resentful, because that doesn't do anything to get free of the resentment. Now, I'll be honest with you. More often than not, I will do it column 1, column 4. I don't always go column 2 and column 3. I kind of just get to where I was the dink, because that's where the freedom was. But that's what I got to do. I do the columns to give me the freedom. Again, if I was selfish, I write where I was selfish. And it can be helpful to then write what I should have done instead, just like I would in sex inventory. If I was dishonest, I write down the dishonesty. And from that, there's usually an amends to make, or a fear that's driving me to be dishonest. So I can then work with that. If I was afraid, what I do is I take it through the columns. Again, for me, I don't get freedom from fear by just saying I had a fear. I take it through the columns. So that's the crux of what I do with those, is like I utilize the columns, because at least for me, those columns allowed me to get freedom from things I didn't think I could get freedom from. They are powerful. Why would I stop doing that? You know what I mean? You ever take a drink of something strong? I have a feeling, you take a drink of something strong and it's like, whoa, that works. Well, you know what I kept doing? Drinking it. It's like that here. The columns work. So I don't want to not do them anymore. I need to continue to do them. And I get to do them in a couple ways, in the sense of, like, it allows me to stay free and clear in the present moment. It also gives me more experience with the columns. And that's always a benefit, because my life depends on helping you. And the more that I take my inventory, the more that I'm able to help you work through yours. So I look for where I was selfish, where I was dishonest, where I was resentful, and I was afraid. And again, I utilize the columns. It says, do we owe an apology? And if I owe an apology, I make a note of it so that I can go and do it. And honestly, if it's on me, I'll bug them right then if I'm able to, because I want to eat that humble pie warm, I want to make that right quickly. Have we kept something to ourselves which should be discussed with another person at once? And that could be something like an amends that we maybe have to make, or often things that have been building up and we need to share it with our sponsor. Another thing that can be helpful, that could be in that, have we kept something to ourselves which should be discussed with another person at once, is if I'm seeing like the same pattern around fears or resentments or selfishness or dishonesty, I often then need to take that inventory to someone. If that someone, usually my sponsor, right? If a solitary self-appraisal is insufficient in 5, it makes sense it's not sufficient in 10, and it makes sense I've got to utilize it in step 11 here in the evening review. And it goes on to, so I can answer that. It says, have we kept something to ourselves which should be discussed with another person at once? So again, that's what I look at. And then it says, were we kind and loving toward all? It's the all that gets me. It's the all. Was I kind and loving toward all? Now, I'll be honest with you. I am somebody, I look at, was I kind and loving outwardly and in my heart and in my judgments? And I did have a sponsor, not my current sponsor, my previous sponsor. She's like, no, you don't got to worry about that. At least if you weren't a jerk out with your face. And I'm like, yeah, but I have to live in here. And if I am not being kind in here, it's not kind in here. It's not a nice place to live. I got to live in here. Yeah, I know. So I take a look at what's in my heart, because, man, that's what's got to change for me. So that's what I do. What could we have done better? Now, the what could we have done better, that is not a stick to beat ourselves up with, but instead that is something that I can ask myself, that I can then take to my prayer life in the morning. It becomes something I can move with and mold with and grow with, rather than a stick of punishment. Were we thinking of ourselves most of the time? Or were we thinking of what we could do for others, what we could pack in the stream of life? Where was the posture of my heart? Was it based on what I could give or what I could get? And it's just helpful to do that, to look at that and to see. And one of the things I will point out is it does say when we retire at night. But oftentimes, when I work with people, we all sort of have different lives and patterns, and our brains work at different times. And so one of the things that I'm really big on is do your evening review whenever you can do your evening review. Have a set time, because not like loosey-goosey whenever, because if you're like me, it won't. It just won't if I'm loosey-goosey whenever. But if it works best for you to do your evening review in the evening, amazing, do it then. If it works best for you to do your evening review in the morning, amazing, do it then. If you want to do it on your lunch hour, amazing, do it then. I was working with a sponsee, and she struggles with evening review. And I approached her with this compassion and this curiosity. Not like, well, you better do it, but that, okay, tell me about it. What's hard about it? And to be honest, often right before bed is the worst time to do it, because my brain has a collapse. And we found that in the evening, after work all day, what she has is a cognitive collapse. I have that at the end of the day, where it's like it's so much, and it's like it's just too much. And I was like, great, do it in the morning, do it at lunch. And she was able to then, she would do it either in the morning or at her lunch hour, and she was able to build momentum. And the ability, the freedom that I have to offer that as a suggestion is also in the original manuscript. The evening review was not an evening direction. It was a morning direction. And it was changed before it was published by the editors in the sense that it didn't have that flow if it was all in the morning. And so, if you want to do your evening review whenever you want to do it, just do it. But do it every 24 hours. Just do it. It doesn't matter when. It matters that we do. So you want to do it before dinner. You want to do it when you come home from work. If your commute is on a train or a subway and you don't get car sick, don't do it if you're driving. But you want to do it then. Do it then. Do it when you can do it. So those are the directions. It says. Hold on. But we must be careful not to drift into worry, remorse, or morbid reflection, for that would diminish our usefulness to others. So again, the evening review is not a stick to beat ourselves with. It is just to see the stuff inside of us that's blocking us. We're not here to live in the self-pity. And the reason of why is because that would make us less useful to others. Again, we're at this part where we get to work for others, for God, to be of service. We are used by this power. And that is incredible. After making our review, we ask. And again, anytime it says we ask, that is a prayer. So after making our review, we ask God's forgiveness and inquire what corrective measures should be taken. And this is another beautiful opportunity for meditative practice, where we can ask in that prayer, and we can spend some time in openness and receptivity, waiting for what corrective measures could I take. But I also want to point something out, because if you read, we ask God's forgiveness, and you've been listening to me sort of natter on about God being loving and I don't have to get good to get God, that almost seems like, what do you mean I got to ask God's forgiveness? I thought you were telling me God wasn't there sitting, judging and punishing me on a throne and you're bad. I still believe that with everything that is in me. But what do I know from experience, the experience of amends? I often do not feel forgiven for actions that I've already been forgiven for unless I ask. And I believe that is the thrust and the purpose of why we're asking God's forgiveness, is so that we can receive the forgiveness that's already there. And yeah, there's a lot of cool meditative practices that we can do. But next week, what we'll do is we'll dive in and talk about upon awakening. So I'll stop it there.